One of the things that we need on our form for iCrash computers is a logo for the company. So we're just going to use one of these simple website logo creation affairs. So the one I tend to like is called Free Logo Services. But if you are good at Photoshop or you enjoy kind of creating logos, or you know of another site that does this for you, then feel free to use whatever you want. So if I go to Free Logo Services, it gives me the option here to create a logo. It'll take me to this page and I click create my logo. So I've picked IT engineering as the sector that I want to create a logo for. I've called it iCrash because that's the name of the company. You could call it iCrash Computers, doesn't matter. And then I've got a tagline here called Custom PCs, but if you prefer, you can just leave this section blank. Click pick your design, and then it just gives you a few options. So what style of logo would you like? What font would you like? What style in terms of the way the the thing is laid out? And then when you click next, it will give you a whole load of different options here. Now at this point, it's kind of prompting you to save it or edit it. It's going to ask you to log in and create accounts and things. I don't bother with any of that. All we need to do is go and grab the built-in Windows snipping tool, find an icon you like the look of, and then draw a square around it with the snipping tool, and then it gives you the option here to save that snip. Save it in the same folder that we saved the Python project earlier on. You can see here there's a logo that I already created. So I can again just call this iCrash logo or something sensible like that. Saves it as a PNG file, which is fine. You can, if you prefer, save it as a JPEG or a GIF, but PNG works great. All I have to do is press save, and then it creates that logo and saves it for me in the folder. Okay, so if we go back to the Python window that we were in a second ago. So what we need to do now is think about how Python lays things out. And it uses a grid method, a little bit like a table. So if you look here from this PowerPoint screen, you can see in computing, especially in programming, rows, columns, any lists of numbers, they generally don't start with 1, they start with 0. So Python lays the window out a little bit like grid references. So this going across here, this is row 0. This is row 1. This is row 2. This is row 3. And the same going down. This is column 0. This is column 1. This is column 2. So I just need to think about where I'm going to put something. So if I want my logo at the top, column 0 and row 0 would put it here at the top. So it's a bit like map references. If I want the next thing to be to the right of that, I would put it still in row 0, but column 1. If I want the next thing to be moved along next to that, to the right of it, I would still be in row 0, but I'd be in column 2. If I want something underneath it, I'd just use same column, different row. So we just need to keep this in mind when we start placing things on our window. So one of the nice things about Python is it has a lot of different ways you can place things in terms of layout and where they go and how you can make them nice and tidy and clean looking. And one of those is called column configure. So I'm going to configure 3 columns. So I'm just telling the window, we've got 3 columns now. I want them all to be the same width, the same weight. So the way we do that is I'm just going to put a little bit of a comment in here just to remind me what this little bit of code is doing. Okay, so configuring the columns. So the way we do that is we type window dot column configure. Okay, now you don't have to do it like this. There are alternatives, but this is nice and it's pretty straightforward. So it's called column configure. We open a bracket and this is column 0. And then we have a comma and we give that a weight of 1. Okay, and now we want 3 columns. So all we've got to do now, quick and easy, we copy this line of code and we just paste it in a couple of times. And because we want column 0, column 1, and column 2, we just change these. The weight is going to be the same for each one, so they're all the same width. Okay, so that defines our 3 columns. We won't see anything change on the form yet, so if we run the form at this point, it just looks exactly the same as it did a minute ago because we don't actually see those columns. Right, and the next thing we want to do is get the logo that we just created onto this form. And we need, first of all, so let's put a comment on so we know that we're dealing with relevant lines of code that deal with the logo. Okay, first thing we need to do is define a variable which will store the image file so it knows where to go get it from. Because we're using the TK library and we've imported it as TK, we have to tell it we're using TK by putting TK dot before any elements from the library that we use, such as windows, labels, buttons, etc. So it'd be logo equals TK dot, and what we're looking for is something called photo image. But what normally happens with TK is you define its TK by putting TK dot, and then the next line, the next letter, sorry, will be capital. So label, capital L, entry, capital E, button will have a capital B, and it understands that. If you don't capitalize it, it won't understand it, and it'll throw an error. It won't display it. Okay. So what we need to do now is we need to tell it what the file is that we want to use. So in quotes, okay, we just type the name of the file. So if I go and have a look, mine is called iCrash logo. Now, if I right click on this and choose properties, what I can see in here, that's the wrong one. Okay, so right click on the logo, choose properties and details. There's the actual file name there, iCrash logo, and it's got a capital PNG. So in here, I need to put iCrash logo.png, okay, capitals. So it's got to be exactly the same, got to be in the same folder as your Python code, or it isn't going to find it. So if you run the window and nothing comes up, it's normally because the file's in a different place than the Python code, or it's because you've typed the name in wrong. Right, so we've got a variable now for that logo. What we need to do now is create the label that will use this photo image and display it on the window for us. And the reason we imported at the top this TTK library is because that's where the photo image comes from. So we do TTK this time because we're using the TTK library. And we're using a label, so capital L, as we said before. Open the bracket. And the first thing we have to do with anything we're putting on a window is tell it where we want to put it. We called our window, so we have to tell it to put it in the window. Now, the image that we are using for this, well, we defined that just here in the line above when we called it logo. So the image is logo. Okay, now what that's done is created a label and it's called it, it's not called it anything, it's just created a label from the TTK library. We've put it on the window and we've told it to use the line above the variable logo, which is this iCrash logo PNG file, but we haven't put it on the grid yet. So we do dot grid, and then we have to tell it what row and column we want it on. So it'll be row equals 0 because we want it top left. Column equals 0, so it's always at the very, very top left. But the other thing we want to do is try and kind of push it all the way to the left hand side of the column, so it's not floating in the middle. And we do that using something called sticky. Okay, and it uses compass points, north, east, south, and west. We want to go as far to the left as we can, so we use west. If we wanted to go obviously to the right, we'd use east. If we wanted to go to the top, we'd use north, and so on. So that should now have defined our label, put an image on it, put it in row 0, in column 0, and made it stick to the left. So let's try it and see if it works. So we run it, might prompt us to save, and there we can see the logo has appeared. It's in column 0, row 0, it's right to the left. It's because we used the sticky, and that's as far as we want to go with this bit. The next job is to put a label here at the side. So we've got a big old title on there, but that's for the next little segment.